Yes, we're live on YouTube again, and we're going to do weekend antics this weekend because I've had two gigs, and one of them was a rave event, and I've not played a rave event for a long time. And I played a rave event on Friday, which, like I say, it was the first one in a long time. So I want to talk about that. And then I did my usual residency at the Book in Driffield, and I'm going to talk about that as well. And yeah, just essentially talk about what's happened over the weekend and stuff like that, and leading up to the weekend. So I am going to try my very best. I know I've already done it a couple of times, but I'm going to try not to say as much. I know that I do it all the time, and I look back on like TikTok stories, Facebook stories, videos, past YouTube videos, live streams. I say it all the time, and it's a habit that I just all the time. So I'm going to try not to do it, but I probably will still do it a few times, but we'll see how we go. So it's been a little bit of a mad weekend this weekend, and I'm not going to lie to you. It's been a little bit of a tiring one, but the only reason it's been a tiring one is because something happened on Thursday that really didn't set me up well for the weekend. It really didn't. So on Thursday night, I was home from work. I was chilling. I was making a killing. I was chilling. I was at the computer, and it was quite late at night, and I was soon thinking about going to bed. And I got an idea to make a hardcore track, and I thought, let's see if I can make this track and get it somewhat in a stable situation where I could play it at a gig the following day. So I was about to start the track, and the fire alarm went off in the building where I live. So of course we all have to go outside and evacuate, and get outside in case obviously there's a fire. And we come outside, everyone's pretty much outside, but there's like no sign of a fire. So we're like, I don't think there's a fire, but again, there's parts of the building we couldn't see from outside. So we rang the fire brigade anyway. They had to come out and check that everything was all right. They came pretty quickly, to be fair, which was really good. And they told us that they couldn't turn the alarm off. It was, it's something that they couldn't do. So we had to ring a specialist to come out to turn the alarm off, as there was no fire. So we rang this specialist guy up, and it came through like our supported housing. They send somebody out. So anyway, with the point being, they said, see, I've just again. They said that it could take up to 4 hours for this person to come out. So we were kind of like, oh, for God's sake, but like, what else can you do? So we waited about, I think it was about 2.5, 3 hours, and the guy came out, and he came out and he turned the alarm off, and we were like, look, it's gone off for a reason. We think there's a fault on it. There's no fire. And he basically just brushed it off and said that nothing up with it. You're all good. It's turned off now. My job he has done, and didn't necessarily really check for any faults or, why it went off in the first place, or to prevent it from going off again. And he'd been left about 10 minutes and the alarm went off again. And we all went back outside again, and we had to ring up again, and then we had to wait for somebody to come out again and turn it off. And we explained on the phone that we told the guy there was a fault. He just basically said that there was nothing wrong and just left, turned it off and left. So it took about, this time, I think it took about an hour and a half. Yes, big ups. And the guy came out. So it was going on nearly going up for 5:30, 6 in the morning by the time the alarm fully turned off and didn't come back on. And I hadn't had any sleep, and I had a gig the following night. I had work the following day, and I'd pretty much done all nighter, and it got to sort of 5:30. So I think it got to about 9:45 to 5. And I was just like, look, like it was safe enough to go back in the building. They told us that we could go back in. So at that point, I was just like, look, I've got work, I've got a gig. I need to somewhat try and get some sleep, even though the alarm's going off. So I got into bed and I actually put a pair of Bluetooth headphones on and laid with some music on. And it probably blocked I'd say about 75% of the alarm. I could still hear it, but I couldn't hear it as bad, like it was manageable. But then if there was a dip in the music or like the song come to an end, and then there's that like couple of second gap before the next song plays, I could hear the alarm again. And then I was just laid, I was just trying to rest, but it's a bit hard to sleep with headphones and music on as well. And I thought if I stick a podcast on where someone's just talking, like that's not really going to be sort of like, that's not really going to drown the alarm out. So I thought the music would like drown the alarm sound out better. But like that was literally, all I could think of. But yeah, so about 5:30 it went off, and then it basically I took my headphones off and finally got some sleep and woke up about 10 to 9, which is a little bit late for work, but I still got there in time. I just had to like get up really, really quickly, get ready and more or less go out the door and, get to work essentially. And then there was people outside still, or people that had gone back outside, and they were kind of like surprised that I was actually going to go to work. So I went to work, but I was really groggy at work, like not in a bad mood, but I was tired. It was like I'd, not slept because I hardly hadn't, I'd had a couple of hours. So I was a little bit like just all day at work, not really switched on. And then I went straight over to a friend's house after work, which I probably shouldn't have done. And then I was just, kind of chilled out there. And then I went home and I managed to sleep. I went back to bed. I had a good, I think I had a good sort of like 3 or 4 hours sleep till about like, think to just after 7:30. I then woke up. I did briefly wake up before, but I was like, I'm not gonna move yet. And then I got up and had a drink and debated like, do I have something to eat? And I didn't feel that hungry, and I just sort of got ready for the gig, and then sort of yeah, went to the gig. So Friday's gig. So Friday I played for an event called Horizon. That was an event that used to take place in Hull many years ago in the 2000s, when the sort of like UK hardcore and the kind of like rave was it was in quite a sort of healthy 2000s place back then. And there was some good events going off in Hull back then, where you would have the likes of like MC Nats and Marcus and ELL and even JD Walker, rest his soul, and stuff like that. And basically they put this like reunion event on, and he was bringing the brand back, and just putting like some smaller scaled events on in a place called Service Station, which is just outside literally where I live. And yeah, so I played there and I played at midnight. And what can I really tell you about the gig? I can't really tell you too much about the gig because there's not really too much to tell. It wasn't a horrible event. It wasn't, it wasn't a bad event, but it wasn't an amazing event at the same time. It was just, it was average. The turnout wasn't massive, but the turnout wasn't like absolutely empty. You weren't playing to like 5 people, but you weren't playing to a full venue at the same time. So I would probably say like the attendance was probably like between 30 and 50 people. I would have probably said like throughout the duration of the night, which, the venue's not massive, so it didn't look like overly dead. But then there were certain points like where if people were stood outside having a smoke, like it would look dead inside. And then sort of just after midnight, a lot of people did actually leave, and they got taxis home and stuff. And about halfway through my set, towards the end of my set, I was like nearly playing to nobody. So it wasn't the best thing I've ever done, but it wasn't the worst gig I've ever done at the same time. I enjoyed it to the extent of, look, I got to get back in a club again and play a hardcore set. And it did give me a little bit of a buzz for it. I do definitely want to do some more events again. As much as I really do love doing the mobile stuff at the moment, I would definitely love to do some more stuff and maybe get back to some clubs where I used to play. I did done some good events in the past. I'd love to get back to that, get back onto the onto the events and the bookings, and go and play some sets and stuff like that. So I'm looking forward to hopefully being able to do that again. I would like to put myself back out there for that. But yeah, it wasn't, like I say, wasn't amazing, but it wasn't horrible. Do I regret like taking the booking and doing the booking? Not really, because I hadn't done an event for that long that it was kind of good just to go somewhere like that and just jump behind the decks and play a hardcore set again. But in the total grand scheme of things, like, I have done better events in the past, and ideally, it just typically wasn't an event that I would usually really take, or should usually really take, just because there wasn't really any value to it, and there wasn't really a reason for doing it as such, other than the fact of, this guy was after a DJ. I realised it was right near me where I live. I was like, oh yeah, I could be available. Didn't really know what it was. And then I realised that I was just playing a very local gig with no headliners, and it was just, playing with, basically, I was just like the youngest DJ there, playing with DJs from Hull that have played for, DJ'd for 25 years. Some people starting in the 90s and some sort of, starting in the 2000s kind of thing, and never really, this is not to sound harsh about them, but never really done anything, or really got anywhere, and just come out once in a blue moon for local Hull gigs, and that was kind of I guess the dealio of what it was. So some good sets, some good mixing. It was, it was nice to see some people I hadn't seen for a while, but I had a enjoyable time, but it wasn't totally amazing. Like I say, it was probably average. That's where I'd probably categorize it. But I still had an enjoyable time, and I enjoyed the set I played, and like I say, I got a chance to play on an RX3, and it was a bit of a blast. And if anything, the women behind the bar, who worked at the venue, they were really kind of and taking some videos and stuff like that of me playing my set. And that was a pretty cool thing. And yeah, I just like I say, I just genuinely liked it. The sound system wasn't perfect. It was a little bit hard to hear, I'm not gonna lie, and it was quite hard to hear the next track you would bring it in, because everything just sounded so loud that I couldn't clearly hear my next track, because the monitors were just so loud. I like having a monitor speaker, but it's like the sound system was cranked up so loud, and then the monitor speaker was so close to the sound system itself that there was just too much noise. And then my headphones were kind of getting drowned out by the loudness of the sound system, that it was just really hard to hear the next track to bring it in. And I know there was a couple of times on the set where I just genuinely literally just genuinely yeah, just double beated and stuff. I could hear it, or where I just hadn't been able to hear the next track, and then a little bit later down the line I could hear it, and then I realised that it's actually out of beat. A few seconds after, I'd be able to kind of hear it and be, oh yeah, that's actually out. So yeah, in that sense, it was a bit hard to hear, but it still wasn't horrible. Still enjoyed myself. Then we move on to Saturday. So Saturday, I was back to my residency at the Book. and basically the residency has been going in a little bit of a mixture of good and bad. So I've really enjoyed the residency. Like I really enjoy it, and I have a lot of fun doing it. But with the other DJ, there was a lot of messing about where the schedule, I think, just kind of was kind of getting all over the place, and it wasn't doing any favors for anybody. So I just decided, look, this other guy's not here anymore. Let's get a fresh poster made, which is the one you see on the thumbnail of this stream. So I thought, let's get a poster made. Let's actually advertise that I'm going to be here every Friday and Saturday, and let's get something properly going. I thought that is kind of like the first step of like, like just kind of hopefully like trying to boost and get more people into the pub, and just let people know that something's happening, because there was quite a few weeks where I was just turning up and playing, but there hadn't really been anything advertised online. I do make posters. Everything had just got so messed up with the other guy that, like, one weekend he'd say, like, I want to do a weekend, and then, like, it had come to it, and then, like, he wouldn't do it, and then it'd get left to me, and then it was all, and I felt like you couldn't really advertise anything just because like everything would be so messed up. Like, you'd advertise he's on, and then people would turn up and he wouldn't be on. So I thought, with him kind of not being there now, it kind of left it for me, and I thought, like, I can make a new poster, I can start advertising and stuff like that, and just properly doing that kind of thing. So I arrived at the pub to drop my equipment off, had a little bit of a talk with the landlady, who said, look, we're very quiet tonight, and we've been quiet lately, so we do need to get our heads together, and we do need to start, thinking about, like, what music we're going to play and stuff like that, and just trying to try some different things, and come up with some ideas and stuff like that, which I thought, fair enough, it's fair enough. That's all fine and dandy. So I shared the poster online, and I got a nasty. Somebody left a nasty comment. Well, I say nasty. It was. I'd say, like, rather than the fact it was nasty, I would say more on the fact that it was rude. It was a rude comment, and it was just basically like, it was a bad review in sense. What it was a bad review, but what kind of peed me off is basically it was a guy who was basically judging a book kind of in a way by its cover, or like he was just like quickly making an assumption about something that he was like not fully aware of. So last weekend I was doing the residency, and again, like no other, it was very quiet, and a couple of young lads were in, and they'd requested that I play some drum and bass. So I thought, yeah, I can stick a little bit of drum and bass on, happy to do that, play a bit of everything. Anyway, there was another lad who was in, ginger hair, forget his name, looks a little bit chavvy, and he said, look, can you play any UK hardcore? So obviously I'm very familiar with hardcore. I do own a lot of it on my USB stick. It's something I can play. So anyway, I played some hardcore for him. I played about 4 hardcore tracks. I mixed about 4 hardcore tracks together, and then I cut out of it and slowed it right back down, because I know that we're in a pub, it's not an hardcore rave. And some guy had come in during that point of me playing like one of the hardcore tracks, or I don't know, he might have been in for like 5-10 minutes and heard what he thought was just hardcore, and he made an assumption, and basically wrote a post on my post where I'd shared the flyer and tagged the pub in it, and basically come across a bit rude. I need to learn to read the dance floor. No wonder the place is empty. No one wants to just listen to hardcore shite. Blah blah blah. And look, I understand hardcore's not everybody's cup of tea. And I can assure you that I did not play hardcore all night, and I do not play hardcore all night. As a matter of fact, I very even rarely play hardcore when I'm at the book. I've played it like 3 times, I think, in all the time. that I've actually been doing the residency there. I go up to bounce and clubland. That is about the limit. I'd never typically go faster than like the clubland and the bounce. And even when I play that, I always play it a little bit slower to what I would play if I was at a rave. So like if somebody had booked me to say, oh, you're gonna go and play at Pure Nightclub, I'd play a bounce set at like 155. If I'm playing any form of like bounce when I'm at the pub, I typically tend to do sort of like 145, anywhere from like 135 up to sort of 145, sometimes 150 at the max. But I typically try to play the most commercial bounce that I can, where it's like just well-known remixes, the drops are not too heavy. That is typically me. But alongside any form of like rave genres, like I do play the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the noughties, the disco. I play a bit of rock, I play a bit of country. I do it all, and I can do it all. And what annoyed me is this guy had kind of only been in that pub for a very brief amount of time. And I understand the music wasn't to his taste. I get that. Not everybody's bound to like everything. But he was only in there for a short space of time. And in that short space of time, he made that assumption that I just didn't know what I was doing. He hadn't considered the fact that somebody had requested it. He wasn't there long enough to see that I'd actually swapped the music over after only playing about 3 or 4 tracks of the tune, of that genre itself. And basically it was just like it just basically made that assumption without knowing the full ins and outs. Or like I don't even have the guy on Facebook as a friend, so I don't even think like he really knows who I am. And that's not to sound big-headed, but like I'm not a newbie that doesn't know what I'm doing, and that's kind of how he made me out to be in the comment. So I deleted his comment just because I thought like I don't need the negativity online. And and then the pub itself had shared a poster, and then he went and tried to like give me a bad name on the venues post about me DJing. And I just thought like, all right, I played a song that's not to your liking, or I played a genre of music that's not to your liking for a brief amount of time, right? And like you're literally going all over Facebook trying to plaster me. No one wants to listen to hardcore shite. Like I say, I played about 4 or 5 songs of the hardcore, and then I switched it over. It was a very brief where I played a couple of club filler tracks. I then played a couple of like classic HDID stuff, and then I literally switched it and slowed it down. And the reason when I switched it, an argument had broke out, and two people were nearly fighting. And I dipped the music while the situation was going off. And then when the situation had got resolved, I put the music back up and played a totally different genre. So that was a crazy thing. And the mad thing is he said on the post as well that it was a Friday night, and I didn't play any hardcore on the Friday night. It was actually the Saturday night that I played the hardcore. And what had happened is I arrived on the Saturday. There was some people in, and as I was about to start, they were like, can you play any bass line? Like UK garage bass line. And then like even the bar staff was like, get it slammed on. So I did. But no, but this guy just, like I say, he made a very quick assumption he painted a very quick picture of who he thought I was without really knowing who I was. And like last night I did not play rave music at all. Later on I played some house music very later on, like midnight. I played some house tunes, sort of like, I think it was about sort of 11:30, where I switched over from the laptop to my RX and played some house, and it was just some very like sort of like 130 sort of deep house, remixes of well-known commercial stuff. There was nothing hard, fast or heavy about it. It wasn't just like boom boom music. It was just a nice bit of house music. It was Saturday night. We'd kind of got quite late on, I'd done lots of like 70s, 80s, country, noughties, 90s, sort of all throughout the night. And had a really good time. Even the landlady came over to me last night and said there was some people that were really enjoying the music I was playing tonight. When I was playing loads of like just absolute classics. And the thing is like, again, I don't mean to sound big-headed, but I can read crowds and dance floors, and I do know what I'm doing, and I can do, despite the fact that I do love my hardcore. I am a rave DJ. I've done hundreds of raves, and played up and down the country playing hardcore sets and bounce sets. I can do the commercial stuff. I do know commercial music. I'm not just an hardcore head. I've been called that so many times over the years. I'm not just an hardcore head. I can do more than just hardcore, and I can do more than just bounce, right? And it really annoys me when people like paint that picture of like who they think you are when they don't really know who you are. And it does, it is very annoying because that, like it's not who I am, if that makes sense. I'm not somebody who just plays hardcore. I might have been like 5, 6 years ago because there was a point where I got like really addicted to it, But like other than that, like I am literally not that person who just plays hardcore anymore. That person is long gone. I am now somebody who still appreciates the hardcore and still has a love for it, but I'm not somebody who just religiously plays it. And so yeah, so last night went really well in terms of like we played some good music. The people that were in, they were happy with the Well, I say happy. There was some younger people that came in, and I think because the vibe, the pub was just so quiet, and some of the music was a little bit old for them. Even though I did drop in some like stuff like 2000s Jason Derulo and stuff like that, which they all knew and sang along to. They moved on to another pub, and that's just pretty much And then there was some other people that came in, and I recognised who they were, and I had a good hello, I had a good chat to them. But they requested some songs, I played them, they sang them, they had an absolutely amazing time. Told me I'm a fab DJ and stuff, and did leave eventually, and that is just pretty much how it goes. But yeah, that is pretty much what had happened last night. Really good vibe. People that were in for the most part, they enjoyed it. Like again, you can't always cater for everybody. Like you're pleasing like some of the older people by playing some 80s stuff, and then you've got like the younger people that they want something a little bit more, not necessarily rave, but they do want something on that's a little bit more upbeat. So they maybe do want some like like noughties kind of like chart music, and something that's a bit more modern, and some people want I'll put some Eminem on and stuff. And you can't, you're in a pub, and a pub is like, you haven't just got like one type of person that comes to that pub. You've got all different kinds of people. So you have got people that I'll put the clubland on, and then you have got people that like like let's have some classic 80s, or let's stick some country on. And then you have got people that just pure up want stuff like Rihanna and Sugar Babes, and and it is hard because you can't always please everybody, which is why I do sometimes try to be a bit mixed. Like one song will be like an 80s song, and then the next song will be maybe like a riding solo Jason Derulo or something, because I do like to try and please everybody, but you can't in that type of job. So we're gonna see how the coming weeks go, and I'm gonna change, and I guess I'm gonna less rave it up. That's essentially what I'm gonna do as well. As I don't think I rave it up too much, but then again, maybe I do. So I typically like I say, the hardcore, I don't play that off. That is not something I play often. Like I say, I go up to like Clubland, so I go up to stuff like Cascada every time we touch, Ultra Beat, Pretty Green Eyes, and then I'll play like some like bounce remixes of some like real commercial stuff, like like a remix of Black Eyed Peas, I got a feeling, and stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I'll do stuff like that. But like that is pretty much like as far as it goes. Really, the hardcore is just something that it comes out once in a blue moon. It's not to come out again, for a long time. It's just something where like now and again, if I'm playing a bit of D&B just for a bit of a change, I might mix an hardcore track into it. But that was like pretty much the whole score with like the hardcore thing. And I want to assure people that I'm not just going to the book to rave it up every weekend, because I think, that image has kind of, because I can understand it. Like some, people have come in and they've heard like rave music, and then they maybe come in another week and they've heard rave music. Sometimes like later on in the night, I do like to go into the clubland, and that is just something I typically like to do when it gets later on. Sometimes I don't do it every weekend, but I do it some weekends, and I think especially like if someone comes out like one weekend and then they don't come out for maybe 2 or 3 weekends, and then they come out again and he's raving it up again. They think that's all I'm doing because they're not there at the other points of the night, or they're not there over weekends when they're not out, and they don't see obviously when I'm doing all the other stuff. So it can be very sort of easy like to judge a book by its cover and think, I'm just somebody, they've seen me play hardcore, they think that's all I do, when typically I don't. So over the coming weeks, I'm gonna try and have a little bit more of a schedule as to like what I'm doing. So like Friday, I want to dedicate that, and like listen, we can do the karaoke. Karaoke is something that can definitely happen. And then we can like again we can do all the like 70s, 80s, 90s, noughties party tunes, dance tunes. And I can just do it remotely, fully from the laptop without needing to go into having a rave mix, and I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to, I want to work with the pub. I want the pub obviously to be successful in the sense that people come in and they enjoy themselves, and we can have a really good time. So I'm gonna definitely aim to try and do that a little bit more. I want to work a little bit more on the promotion of like the fact that I'm playing there, just so people know that it's happening. And then people know that they can come there, and there'll be a bit of a vibe. And then maybe we can do some like themed nights. So like we can do like maybe like an 80s versus 90s night. Someone did suggest it online when the pub did ask, like, we want to hear from you, like what things you'd like to see. Someone did put like a really, really good idea for like themes, and I thought, why not do like a theme night at the end of the month, where like like the last Saturday of every month is like a themed night, and and like each month it's a different theme. So like one week it could be an R&B night, the next month it's it's an 80s night, and the following month it might be like a 90s, and then maybe you've got like a back to the 2000s, or maybe you've got like a Britpop night, or maybe you've kind of got like a I don't know, maybe you've got like a rock night, like, oh, let's have a rock night and stuff like that. And I think that would be like a really, really cool thing, to do that maybe. And then like giving people maybe a chance, like, what theme would you like to see this month? And then like, we have maybe a little vote on the theme, and then we go with, whatever theme's voted, or something like that, like, and I think that would be like pretty cool. So yeah, let's have a, I think that's something to do, and I think that is like something to work towards, and I think that is something that very much could happen. So I'm very, very happy that is going to happen, hopefully, and we can maybe do some, or even if it's not like like the last of every month, like we can do some theme nights every now and again, maybe, and do again. We can do like a clubland night as well, and I'll, and that can be like the, sort of like the one-off where I do kind of rave it up a little bit more. We can just, again, R&B nights, we can go back to the 2000s, You know, like I grew up in the noughties or something, you know, do like proper where we're playing all the like Akon, Jason Derulo, Rihanna's, you know, Sugar Babes, Spice Girls, you know, stuff. Um, you know, Pixie Lot, the Saturdays, you know, Black Eyed Peas, all the proper, yeah, you know, proper sort of like 2000s, you know, Beyonce, you know, yeah, all that kind of stuff. Could do like some like IB for house themed nights. That'd be like a really really cool thing to do, and yeah, we could, you know, we could create some really cool themes, I think, and it would be really really cool to do that. Would be absolutely, you know, a good idea, I think. And then what I was also thinking as well, somebody said like, why don't we do what I'm doing at Tiger, which is obviously in the beer garden event, and then somebody said like, why don't you do that over here? And then the landlady did kind of say like it probably wouldn't really work, and then I thought, well, actually, it kind of there's every chance that it could work, and it's actually quite easy to make it work more than you actually think. So basically, with like if we were to do something like what I'm doing at the Tiger, but kind of do it inside, that would kind of be like it could work, but it would just be on a smaller scale. So like you wouldn't kind of necessarily go from like 3 in the afternoon until 10 at night, and you know, you wouldn't kind of be outdoors and indoors. But what you'd kind of do is you'd have like the you'd have like you'd maybe go like 7, so you'd start 7, so you'd go like 7 till 10 of like live music, and you just have like a couple of acoustic singers that, you know, that would just kind of play inside the book itself. You'd have a couple of acoustic singers, and then you'd have some DJs again, you know, and you'd have some DJs like, you know, continue and play music, or like I'd just DJ. You know, you'd have a couple of acoustic singers, and then you'd have like myself, you know, that would just take over like the DJ, and you know, again, you just have some really like remote, just, you know, bring your guitar lead, we'll get you set up, and then, you know, just strum away and sing. And that would be like essentially, you know, it'd just be like a really remote like acoustic thing that I think like necessarily, I think there's every chance that that could work. The only issue is like you wouldn't want to do it now, because like if I started then advertising that we're going to do that, it would take the limelight away from the one that we're doing outside. But I think definitely like doing the one outside, and then like after we've done the one outside, we could do like a smaller one inside that would kind of be like, well, hey, look, this is, you know, something that could happen sort of in between doing the outside one. So like we do the outside one, it goes well, we're going to do the outside one next year. Let's do a smaller one inside while we kind of wait for kind of like the next outdoor one to come round, you know, like, because we're going to have a whole 12 months from when this one takes place to when the next one will take place. So, you know, you've got 12 months. Within that 12 months, like, you could do one like maybe the beginning of next year, or you could do one late this year, you know, depending how intermittent and how kind of small it would be. And it would work very well, you know. You have them in like Hull all the time, really little small venues, and they just get like a couple of acoustic singers, and they do acoustic nights, and I think that could really work, you know. You, like I say, you just get a couple of people, you know, you get 2 or 3 singers, you know, that just sing 20-minute slots each. So like, you know, you start, you have the first singer come on at like, you know, 7:10. They play for 20 till 7:30. You know, that takes it to 7:30, and then the next person will kind of go from like 25 to 8. You know, to like literally 5. You know, and then you've got kind of like 5 to 8. And then again from 5 to 8. you've got 8 o'clock. You've got the next one that goes on kind of like from 8 o'clock till kind of like that 20 past 8. And then again, you've got like, 25 past, and you could make some at work in that sense, or you could give them a half an hour slot each, and then, right, you do 7 till half past, you do half past till 8, and then you do 8 till half 8, and then, the fourth person does like half 8 till 9, and then a DJ goes on from like 9 till the early hours. Do you know what I mean? So there's every like possibility, there's every opportunity that could work. But like I say, you wouldn't want to clash with the outdoor one, because the outdoor one's kind of going sort of like so well. In terms of like promotion, there's quite a bit of excitement around it. Should be a really, really cool thing. So anyway, with that being said, I think, that's where we kind of lie with the future. Just trying to see how we can make the pub be a little bit more sort of get more people in, essentially, give people a reason to want to come. Because I think sometimes, like, there's like regulars and locals that know that I'm going to be on, but like for the most part, like people of the town don't necessarily know I'm there, just because there is a lack of advertising. So I think like this, like we just got to like advertise I'm there a bit more. We've got to kind of make the offer a bit more so people know as well that it's not just a rave as well. And like there's karaoke in the 70s, 80s, and that, that we're doing a bit of everything, essentially. That is where it's got to be kind of like that is where we've kind of got to get the thing, so people don't just think it's a rave, like, because it's not. And then I think, if we get a little bit of advertising and it becomes a regular thing, and more people start to know, right, I'm here, I'm going to be, blah, blah, blah. This is where it's going to be, like, I think that'll be the cool thing, I think that's where we'll lie. And I think, growing that in the beer garden brand is also like very important to me. And that is something I do definitely want to stick with, because I feel like some good things could happen for that. I feel like it could be like a really, really cool thing to do that. And it would work like really, really well. So with that being said, that is going to pretty much do it for this stream. I'll just give you a quick update on In the Beer Garden. I will do a proper stream about In the Beer Garden. So what I will say, the DJ competition is not going well at all. People are just barely entering it. I don't know if I don't know if I'm shadow banned. It's like people don't see stuff. And it's just like there's a couple of people that have like said they're going to enter, and then like they just, like one guy sent me a mix to my inbox, and I was like, you need to post it on the thing, you need to post it in the comments of the post. And then like he liked the post, and he just didn't even like put it in the comments. And I had a quick listen to the mix, and look, it wasn't a horrible mix, but look, it wasn't gonna win, and it was the guy just, it wasn't even a new mix, and I just thought, look, I'm giving you an opportunity here, and you've just chucked an old mix at me, on the hope that I'd just say, all right, I'll put you on. No, and and I know the person is, but enter it properly, so that has just kind of not gone too well. Everything else, like the posts, they're not doing too bad. People are liking and sharing them. When I'm making announcements, people are liking them. I'm doing like artist spotlight videos and stuff like that. And that is like a really, really good thing. So, that side of it is doing well. People are interested. Loads of people have told me to come into the event. Loads of people have asked questions about it. Loads of people have said, like, this is obviously like, this is going to be a really cool thing. I'm excited for it. Lots of people looking forward to it. People saying like, we're gonna make it. We're gonna make a day of it, and we're gonna have a really good time, which is really good to see. Just literally the DJ competition has not done well at all, and I'm at the very brink of like just pulling the competition like completely, and just like saying no, unfortunately, and like it's less stress, and I can just like I can literally just book somebody and book them, and they could like literally just come and play a set, and I'm thinking like I want to book somebody to play a really sort of like play a nice sort of like commercial house set, essentially. Somebody who's just gonna not rave it up as much as like, because I've got like other DJs that are like essentially like supply clubland and bounce like myself, but like it's about kind of like, okay, like the DJs are not just gonna play that, and it's kind of like that whole vibe of like, well, listen, look, play like a nice commercial sort of house set. So with that being said, let's do it. Let's see how we go. Might give the comp another week, see if I get any more interest on it. If not, then I'm just gonna get the ball rolling and move on. And people don't want the opportunity. Like I say, I think it's a thing of like they're struggling to see posts as well. And I just thought like, because I'm a DJ myself, I've gone to a lot of raves, I know a lot of up and comers. I just thought like, I share that there's a competition, like then basically like, people would comment on it. What I might do is I might just make a post on my own profile, like not share it from the page, do it on my own profile, and just say like, people post a comment, post a mix in the comments, and then that way it goes directly to me, but it might just guarantee that we get more entries, because maybe people are just not seeing it from the page for whatever reason. So that may be a possibility, and then just essentially we'll see how it goes. But if it doesn't do that so well, I'm probably just going to pull it and call it a day, and maybe try something else instead, just putting a DJ on or something. But with that being said, there we go. So make sure to like, make sure to comment, share, all of that good stuff, and we'll see you soon.